Chapter 4. With his first class done, Gil had a few hours before the afternoon session began. He ate at the flask with Hammond and Millie, who enjoyed reliving the defense class. While Hammond was narrating his time as a hunter, Gil reviewed his class schedule. The parchment organized his classes into two groups, cardinal and technical. The cardinal classes were defense, storytelling, and wondercraft. Herblore and alchemy were marked technical. Each day rotated between a cardinal class in the morning and a technical class in the afternoon. So Gil had Herblore in a few hours. He decided to explore the egg in more detail after lunch. There were many students who spent their free time in other ways, though. It was at the end of the meal that they caught wind of a sword fighting tournament at the green from some older students at a nearby table. "I'll bet on different fighters. We can't lose. It's a stubbly-chinned boy squeaked. "Don't hurt yourself, Yap," someone grumbled. "Listen, we swing by the tourney early. Watch the fighters warm up. Scout. When the other betters come in, we start talking up the bad fighters, see? Get the firsties rolling die, so to speak. Then—" "I think I'll head out for a walk," Hammond said, pushing his empty plate away. "Going to stretch my legs a bit before Wondercraft this afternoon. Sounds like a good time for a nap." He grinned, though Gil wasn't quite sure he was joking. A short walk to the egg, and Gil was standing before the smooth, pale dome once more. Elementary Herblore. Cracks sprouted from the base of the wall and crawled up to a point over his head. He pushed, and the door swung open once more. The same dry, leathery smell greeted him as he entered. A warm glow emanated from the dome overhead, and it was easy to imagine he was inside a colossal egg. He spent his time poking through the Herblore books around him, thumbing past sketches of mosses and mushrooms, reading bits and wits about the various flora. He selected a few of the more interesting texts and brought them to a fine, plump chair with good light. He was not going to get lost again. He read for what felt like the better part of an hour. Something began to bother him. He settled deeper into the chair, but the feeling remained. He focused on the unsettling feeling for a long moment, but it had no source. Then a realization washed over him. There were no bells. The Spire's hourly bells had become a constancy for him over the previous days. He should have heard the first bell by now. But maybe the reliable cadence couldn't breach the egg? Gil sprang to his feet. What time was it? Had he missed Herblore already? He rambled off the names of each of the books he was reading, and they laboriously flew back to their bookcases and nestled into their places. He turned to the nearest shelf. "I'm ready to go." The shelf popped out an inch. Gil saw a panel of sunlight through the gap, though the light did not shine into the egg. It was odd, but he had no time to ponder it as he would have liked. He eased the shelf further open and slipped into the afternoon. Within moments, a bright, heavy toll rolled across campus. Gil waited fearfully for the second toll. The Spire waited several long moments before repeating the single toll. It was still only first bell. He sighed. It was easy to lose track of time while reading, especially in a place as wondrous as the egg. With an hour until Herblore, he inspected some of the students passing on Hazel Street. Many wore robes or the alchemy darks, like Gil, to mark them as a student of magic. However, half of the students were garbed differently. Jerkins, sheepskins, tunics, aprons, high collars, and filled pants. Some students were identifiable, like the band of future stonemasons with a belt full of hammers and chisels. Others could be cooks, merchants, or wanderers. Anything, really. The guessing game was entertaining, though Gil wished he had more nerve to ask the mysterious students what they were studying. He made his way through paths and buildings to the western edge of Hazeltop, past the green and the arena. A small timber lay along the edge of Hazeltop, smushed between the meadows to the north and the fields to the south. On a stump at the edge of the forest sat an older man with pale, watery eyes looking up the hill toward Hazeltop. A gaggle of students sat on the grass around him. Gil spied Wilkes and Rhea among the group already. Rhea sat among a group of chattering girls, while Wilkes was sitting quite alone. Gil joined him. "What have I missed?" Wilkes looked up in surprise. His face, formerly green as an early squash, now only had a smear of green across his chin. Nothing much. He's pretty much been like this the whole time. Is he the master? Gil asked. He examined the old man, who was still squinting upward. He looks a little different. Different would be good, Wilkes grumbled. Gil wasn't quite sure what to say, but he was saved by a gravelly sigh from the man atop the stump. Another year, is it? His eyes wandered down the hill and strayed over a few students. Thought I heard something. Well, here I am. Always a good start. He cackled deep in his chest. Well, this be the thicket. Find some timple-belly petals, why not? Get on, then. Gil and Wilkes exchanged a look. A red-haired girl raised a tentative hand. The man peered up the hill. Excuse me, she said, do you have any more instructions, or... Speak up, he said to her general direction. Can't hardly hear you. The birds, see? She took a moment to process this. Can you teach us how to find the temple belly? Yes, there it be, the man said. She raised her voice to a near shout. Yes, but how do we find it? Ah, in the thicket. It's all there, see? Off you go and bring back temple belly. He shifted to a more comfortable spot on the stump. What's your name? Someone called. A slow, rumbling snore came from the master. He looked quite the same in sleep as during his speech, except his eyes were now squished shut. Hesitantly, students rose and began trickling into the forest. This is hopeless, Wilkes said. How are we supposed to find Temple Jolly? Gil patted his shoulder. Temple Belly. And he actually chose an easy one. It's the first plant mentioned in this book I was just reading. It grows in shallow streams. Wilkes frowned. What were you reading? Does this class even have a book? Not officially, Gil said. I was just passing time in the egg. Come on, let's explore the thicket. Students roamed the forest, sniffing and scanning the ground like a dog at dinner. There was an excitement to the woods, the certainty that something new and curious was around you if only you could see it. It was a library of wood and water and fur and feathers, an unimaginable wealth of knowledge often ignored and rarely studied. They passed some boys inspecting tree branches. Don't even know what this thing looks like. How are we? Gil and Wilkes went on, following game trails which gradually led downward. Quite the morning, Gil offered, after a few minutes of hiking. Bad to worse, Wilkes replied. Can only get better, right? Not if someone bombs me again. About that, Gil said. You know, I didn't expect things to go quite like that. Wilkes frowned. That was you? I was trying to distract the hunter. She almost had you, and I thought I could, well, I'm not really sure. Wilkes watched him. Then he chuckled. I thought I had someone trying to make a fool of me. You did make a fool of me, he clarified, but you didn't mean to. That helps, somehow. A weight lifted off Gil, and he smiled. I'll make it up to you. Listen, there's water nearby. The source turned out to be a creek tucked behind a wall of oaks and elms. Clear water gurgled over rocks. Gray fish darted through the water. My father called them river goats, Wilkes said. The chubs, I mean. They'll eat anything they can swallow. Is your father a fisherman? Gil asked. Farmhand. My parents are bakers. He did not mention that they owned the bakery or that it was regarded as the best in Evervale. They weren't magical? Gil smiled. Some people think their bread is, but they're not. You don't need magical parents to have magic yourself, you know. Maybe not, but it would help, Wilkes said. They walked along the bank for some time before Gil spotted the lovely pink petals of a temple belly. The flower head was large as a sunflower, and only a few steps from the edge of the stream. The stalks supporting the head looked strangely like a rope. It wasn't until he looked into the water that he realized the stalk was composed of a dozen individual stems braided together to form a trunk. In the deeper, calmer water, the stems unwound from the stalk to burrow into the riverbed. The water was only up to their shins. It was refreshingly cool. They harvested a few of the large pink petals and squelched their way up the hill and out of the thicket. The master was still asleep when they returned. A handful of students were waiting there as well, each having collected a different plant. One student eyed the forest angrily, his face and hands red with furious boils. The remainder of the class dribbled out to the stump over the next few minutes. A few more students had found Timpleberry. Gil was not surprised to see Rhea holding the flower. The class waited. There were a few half-hearted coughs, but nobody really wanted to wake up the master and be sent back into the thicket. So it was that the class waited and whispered until the bell rang, and they were free. The master didn't seem to mind. The following morning brought Wondercraft. Every first-termer took the class, and it was at breakfast that Gil realized there were multiple sections. "Aren't you coming to class?" he asked Hammond and Millie. "It's nearly 8th bell." "Dream on," Millie said. "Mine's at 10th. "Hey, mine too," Hammond said. Millie looked at him. "You're in my class? I thought I was in the smart section." "What's that supposed to mean?" Gil smiled and left them to their quibbling. The morning was overcast and filled with the steady patter of rain against stone, wood, and leaves. He exited the flask and was surprised by the slightest chill in the air, a sign that fall was nearing. He pulled up the hood of his cloak, grateful for the oil and the wool that repelled most water. He made his way south, down the slopes toward the city of Gwent. After a few minutes he veered west to the edge of Hazeltop. In the rain, the sea of trees before him almost looked like the thicket, but a keener eye revealed the truth. The orchard was not tangled and twisted like the thicket to the north. The orchard was tailored, uniform, well kept. Row after row of handsome trees stretched outward, and as Gil drew closer, he saw that they were well adorned. The air was fresh with rain and sweet with apples, pears, and cherries. Hazel trees and walnut trees added an earthy base to the honeyed air. Among the trees stood a middle-aged man draping a large tarp across several branches. Students huddled beneath the nearest trees, trying to stay out of the rain. He pulled the tarp taut and tied down the corners, forming a canopy. Students raced under the large tarp. He chuckled, beard bouncing with droplets. The teacher noticed Gil approaching and immediately strode to him. "What is your name?" Gil expected the question to come with a weary, bored tone, but it did not. The teacher's voice was smooth and warm, his eyes steady. He gestured toward the awning and led Gil out of the rain. "I'm Gil of Evervale," he said quickly, aware that he'd been staring for several seconds. He smiled. "A child of the Vale. I would love to know what drew you to this little school. Would you tell me someday?" Gil nodded. "And what should we call you?" "Loris." Gil took a place under the tarp. "Wait, I thought you were the master. Are you a student?" "Both, my friend," Loris said. He spotted a student descending the hill and set off to meet her. The trickle of students slowed until the last one joined them under the canopy. Loris stopped just outside the makeshift shelter and smiled as though they were beside a fireplace in the flask. "Welcome to Wondercraft. I have looked forward to this very moment for many moons, but if you can believe it, I haven't determined what we should explore today. Does anyone have an idea?" He asked the question pleasantly, rain dripping from his hair and beard. It took several seconds for Gil to realize Loris was actually waiting for an answer. "You mean, what are we supposed to work on?" a heavy-set boy asked. "Quite the opposite," Loris said. "We must identify something worthy of your examination. To study elsewhere is simply counterproductive." An excited murmur swept the class, which was broken by a tall girl with a long braid. "No, it isn't." Gil gaped at her. She had contradicted a master. He waited for a sharp retort, but was caught off guard once more by Loris's gentle tone. "How do you see?" "It's easy," the girl droned. "Most things worth knowing are boring." Loris smiled. "Are you a student of Master Elry's?" "How did you know?" the girl asked cautiously. "Did he also share with you that no house was built not nail by nail?" The girl nodded. "Another of his favorites, and very true in some sense," Loris said. "May I presume your first carpentry lesson was spent sawing branches?" "Yes." "Most inspiring, but there are other ways." Loris peered through the rain, searching for something beyond Gil's sight. Suddenly he smiled broadly. "Join me, friends. We have found today's lesson." He set off up the hill. His wave of excitement spurred Gil and most of the class forward into the rain. After a pause, the remainder of the class followed reluctantly. Several minutes traveling north on Hazel Way brought them to the heart of Hazeltop. Loris broke from the path and looped around the flask, past a cluster of apothecaries between two scrolleries. He brought them to the eastern edge of Hazeltop, where streets and structures gave way to a rolling hill falling down to a misty lake. A row of small, tidy houses formed the outer ring of the school's reach. He paused beside the first house. How was this home built? The girl came forward at once, eyeing the wall and roof critically. Wood frame, pine boards by the look of them. Thatch tied down to make a dry, warm roof. Can't tell from the outside, but they probably used a crook nail technique to nail these boards to the frame. The rain was lessening as the morning sun burned through the clouds. Loris watched the swelling lightness for a breath before turning to the class. Wood, thatch, iron. Many would say these are enough to construct a house, but they're not. The builder must be clairvoyant, envisioning the entire home before the work begins. Purpose must move him. Knowledge that this collection of timber and iron will be protection from wind and rain. That he is making a home, not a house, and that lives will be spent within these walls. Loris nodded to the girl. It is hard to imagine a higher calling. This forced a smile out of her, and he gestured to the row of houses. Within these homes live Bunt, Perrine, Mika Willowweed, and Avon. Bunt has worked in the flask for many years, and he is responsible for cleaning a great many of the plates and bowls you use every day. Perrine tends the grounds, and Mika has a knack for collecting valuable oddments that most shopkeepers overlook. Avon and his family spend most of their days fishing on the Silver Smoke. Loris glanced eastward to the huge, flat lake. Why am I telling you all this? A pause, and then a small boy piped up. So we know who lives here? That and more, Loris said. So as you leave this class, you know who has tended the grass beneath your feet and the branches overhead. So you see your lunch plate is cleaned from another's work, and the food was gathered patiently and skillfully. That the spices you taste were grown many miles away, and only the slow, quiet work of a master barterer brought them to you. The builder understands this, that we are all pieces of a grand home, each contributing utility and beauty. The rain had stopped, and Gil felt his curiosity exceed his caution. What do you bring, Loris? The spire rang, and the master chuckled. It seems you'll have to enlighten me next class. Enjoy the sun, friends. Gil hiked up the hill with the other students. Most were quiet, turning over the same questions as Gil. He studied introductory potion craft in room 107 until the 12th bell rang. He packed up his books and headed down the staircase to the dining room. The doors burst open as a flood of hungry students emerged, Hammond and Millie among them. Gil joined them for lunch. The meal was delicious, and he couldn't help but feel the smoothness of the plate, worn down by years of handling. It became very clear that his class had been quite different from Hammond and Millie's. Houses? So, you didn't go to Gren at all? Millie asked. He brought us there right at the start of class, and we had to talk to different shopkeepers, learn something from each one. Yeah, we looked at the houses. It was really neat, Gil said. Sounds boring, Hammond said. At least Grent is interesting. It's a city crammed inside a town. What did you learn from the shopkeepers? Gil asked. Hammond laughed. I learned a great deal about mint from a man at the chipped mug. Spearmint, peppermint, apple mint, red mint. How do you know which one to use? Ash and I got sidetracked by a storyteller, Millie confessed. For the whole class? Gil asked. It was a good story. Gil felt nervous walking to his first alchemy class with Master Wicks. He headed north on Hazel Way and soon came to the cauldron. The building looked like a massive cauldron kicked on its side. The huge, curved archway led into the structure, and he entered, wide-eyed. The room was filled with work tables and cabinets. The ceiling and walls sloped together at the far end of the building like he was looking into a soup bowl. The previous class was just leaving, second-term students by the size of them. Once the tables were vacant, Gil trickled in with the other first-term students. He sat near the back, running a hand over the craggy surface of the table. The wood was scarred in some places, burnt in others. He could look right through the table in a few spots where something had melted through. There was a pop overhead, and he looked to the curved ceiling. Colorful mists and smokes were swirling together. Sparks spat from the epicenter of the whirling vapors. He pulled his gaze from the show overhead and inspected the room. Each workstation had 2 chairs and a large, knobby cauldron. Students began to fill the stations around Gil. The other chair at his desk remained empty, and he watched as reluctant pairs of friends took the first few rows of tables. A large board hung from the wall. Upon the board, in large, thick letters, ingredients from the following are prohibited: phoenix, dragons, fairies, unicorns, goblins, etc. Students are also forbidden from bringing iron in any form into the cauldron. Master Wicks stood behind his station at the front of the class. 3 pewter cauldrons sat atop a long, smooth table of polished wood. All 3 cauldrons were smoking, if that was the term. The smog rising from the pots looked like smoke, except smoke wasn't green or orange. Smoke didn't twist into the shapes of animals as it rose either. On a shelf behind the master were rows of lovely flasks and bottles, all striated with elegant silver lines. Alchemical glass, Gil realized, designed to contain the strongest potions. A soft voice came from his right. "Is this spot taken?" It was Rhea. "Just by you," Gil said. She seemed very nervous as she took the seat beside him and looked around the room. Her eyes settled on their lumpy cauldron. Is it supposed to be so bumpy? It was not quite what Gil had anticipated, to be fair. The pewter cauldron had once been fine, he was sure, but calcified warts and coagulated lumps had grown over the surface from years of use. Something the color of old apples burbled inside. A bubble swelled on the potion's grainy surface, wobbled, and burst. "The cauldron or the potion?" Gil asked. Rhea managed a smile. Master Wicks finished washing his hands as the last of the work tables were filled. He dried them carefully, inspecting the students seated before him. "The object of today's lesson is legend, as alchemy goes. You've heard of Flarioch's Whisper." The name tickled Gil's memory, just beyond reach. Master Wicks nodded. "Only a handful of the alchemist's stories remain, but they are most interesting indeed. He was an odd man, and it's no wonder he caused trouble passing through the barony. Most towns had never heard of an alchemist, certainly never seen one. A baron's son took an interest in the traveler's strange shows. The boy ordered his guards to steal a potion for Flarioch. Curiosity overpowered sense, and the boy drank. Master Wicks eyed them one by one. Most unwise. The boy became very odd very quickly, and the baron was not pleased. Flarioch was imprisoned. It was in his cell of dirt and stone that he created Flarioch's Whisper, a potion that could link his mind to another's, useful for a prisoner in need of convincing a guard to free him. The brew is simple by many standards, but I believe you will find it your match today. Turn to page 23 of Introductory Potioncraft. Gil flipped open his book with the other students. The page was full of neat sketches and directions. A list of ingredients trickled down the page, long and wavering as a cat's tail. Beside each ingredient was a number and some properties. "You'll notice," the alchemist said, "more information than you can currently understand. In time, the language of alchemy will be rendered to you. For now, see the magical index number beside each ingredient. What is the min of earwax?" Several hands shot up, and Master Wicks selected a stout boy near the front. "1, sir." "Very good. And what are the min and properties of mortar, which is the 3rd ingredient, if memory serves?" He selected another student. "0.9, and it says mortar is a stabilizer?" "Right again. Therein lie 2 more principles of alchemy, the theory of magnitude and the law of similitude. If you recall your defense lesson earlier this week, I stated that everything is magical to some degree. The alchemist quantifies this magical degree with the min. A min of 1 is perfectly neutral, with a greater number being more magical and a lesser number being less magical. The theory of magnitude states that a potion's magnitude is equal to the sum of its parts. This is not exactly true in practice, but it is a near estimate. What is the greatest min required in Flareock's Whisper? A glow sprout, someone answered. Yes, and the very vegetation growing in Flareock's cell. The glow sprout, of course, is an unusual mushroom that glows brightly in the presence of beauty. For centuries, they were kept in taverns, and bards were only paid if they made the sprout shine. To this day, the best musicians are still named shiners. He strode to the cabinet along the wall and withdrew a dull tuber. And the second law of alchemy, the law of similitude. Gil remembered the answers from his reading, but he kept his hands on the table. Rhea raised her hand. A potion is the whole of its ingredients. Your name, young lady? Rhea Goldborn, sir. Baronese, if I'm not mistaken, and you are correct. Potions assume the properties of all their ingredients, both strong and weak. There is no surer way to destroy a potion, and perhaps the alchemist himself, than to add iron, for the metal is among the least magical of substances. Alchemy behaves erratically in its presence, as it does with certain magical artifacts like dragon scales or phoenix feathers. You'll notice Hazeltop is built of wood, not iron. Master Wicks came to a stop beside his cauldron. There remains a third and final rule, upon which the first two stand. Gil knew this one as well, but he couldn't find the courage to raise his hand. Rhea did. Lassitude, Master Wicks. Indeed. Potions are by nature weary, slumbering. A potion must be catalyzed to produce a magical effect. Otherwise, it is no better than a pot of horrible soup. A potion can be catalyzed through many means, including stirring and inclusions of different ingredients, but the brindle command is common for most basic recipes. Gil was amazed. Alchemy seemed so simple when Master Wicks framed it in those 3 rules, but he suspected it would be more difficult than it seemed. He jotted down a quick note in his book. Theory of magnitude. A potion assumes the power of its ingredients. Law of similitude. A potion assumes the properties of its ingredients. Law of lassitude. A potion sleeps until it is awakened. You have the theory, the alchemist called to the class. Now the application. At the end of class, you and your partner's draft of Flareock's Whisper will be tested. You have the remaining half hour. If your potion is incomplete, you will finish it for homework. The cabinets hold any ingredients you will need. Best of brewing. Chairs scraped stone as students rushed to the cabinets. Gil was happy enough to let the crowd thin out before hurrying to grab their ingredients. And Ray seemed in no hurry either. In fact, she was eyeing the cauldron with something near fear. Are you all right? He asked. She shook herself. I was just thinking about the potion. I'll grab the ingredients. She popped up and started collecting oddments from the cabinet. Wokus was also browsing, looking from the cupboard to his book in confusion. Rhea turned, smiling. Okay, so here's mortar, worm castings, limestone, glow sprout. Don't forget earwax, Gil said. She laughed and pointed to a little pouch in her crate. Right here. So I'll measure this all out and you work on adding it to the cauldron. Fair? Gil nodded and they set to work. Rhea measured and organized the ingredients. She ground the limestone block. Worm castings and water were mixed in equal parts to create a paste. A scruple of earwax. Gil added the ingredients to the cauldron. He stirred as the ingredients demanded, and the murky, muddy pot smoothed to something like the hot caramel from his parents' bakery. The next step called for the glow sprout infusion. Reyes sliced the tuber down the middle, and Gil added the halves to the cauldron. They sank into the elixir. Do you want to say it? Gil asked. Better not, Reyes said quickly. My lucky day. Gil turned to the pot. Brindle. A finger of steam curled from the surface. Gil read the final line of the instructions. After catalyzation, stir until potion lightens to gold and the surface crystallizes to shards not exceeding a finger length, approximately 20 full revolutions or approximately 80 quarter turns in the journeyer's fashion. He set to stirring the 20 strokes. As he stirred, the potion brightened to a honey gold. Odd clumps began to form on the surface, and with each rotation, they lengthened. By the 20th turn, they could have passed for shards of golden glass, bobbing gently in the cauldron. Most of the other cauldrons held golden potions as well. Gil couldn't help but notice Wilkes's pot, which held something like tar. Smoke spat furiously from the knobbly cauldron. "Burned," Master Wicks said as he passed the table. "Burned?" Wilkes demanded of Master Wicks. "It's a liquid. You can't burn a liquid." Master Wicks raised an eyebrow. "Your cauldron says otherwise. Overstirred, I presume." This drew giggles from nearby work tables and nearby work tables at Wilkes. "Well, you're not even teaching anything. You just walk around, seeing how we're all messing up. Who made you the master of alchemy?" Gil waited for the sharp reprimand, but the master simply examined the student's book. "This textbook contains all the instruction you'll need for this task. I should know, as I wrote it. You will have more luck on page 23, like I mentioned at the beginning of class." Master Wicks turned several pages and handed the book back. Wilkes slammed the book into his bag and stormed out of the cauldron. "Time's nearly up," Master Wicks called, watching him leave. "You all have 1 minute to skim your shards. You and your partner will eat one each. If brewed properly, Flariock's Whisper will allow you to communicate over exceptional distances." Hesitantly, groups began to scoop the shards out of their cauldron. Gil used the ladle to spoon out the shards onto their table. Up close, they looked like peanut brittle. He took 2 and offered one to Rhea. "Cheers." He crunched into it. The flavor was earthy, and though he would not have gone back for seconds, it was not as unpleasant as he had anticipated. He began to hear a faint buzzing. Master Wicks directed partners to opposite ends of the room. We will go one student at a time. I will give you a word, which you must whisper. Your partner will relay the word to me, if they can hear you." The activity was quite amusing, Gil thought. Master Wicks provided a tall girl with her phrase. She whispered something, and her partner across the cauldron flinched in surprise. "A bowl of pheasant soup?" the partner called back. "Well done, Miriander and Tam." Other groups were not so lucky, and the second student was obviously trying to read the lips of their partner. Gil grew increasingly nervous as more and more groups failed the task. Not only could he fail, but the entire class would see him. His hands grew sweaty as Master Wicks stopped beside Rhea. Her lips moved, and he heard her clear as if she were whispering in his ear. Amazement flooded him, and he returned the phrase, "Of drakes come snakes." Master Wicks nodded. "Well said, Gil and Rhea." The effects of the potion faded as Gil and Rhea cleaned their cauldron and put away the pouch of earwax, but his thrill of experiencing magic did not. That night, Hammond and Millie raved about their first lessons in enchanting and runes. Gil was content to eat and listen, his mind warm and swirling like a cauldron.